Good evening and welcome to the Grove City Historical Society and Museum. We're glad to see all of you here tonight. Few faces that I'm not familiar with, but maybe you've been here before. For those who haven't, we have 3 floors here at the museum, and if you'd like to come back for a tour, we're open Monday nights from 6 to 8 and Tuesday through Saturday from noon to 3. This is an all-volunteer organization, and we operate solely on donations and also our membership fees to cover our expenses. So again, if you want to come back sometime, we would love to have you. We're so pleased tonight to have Cynthia Friend Crytzer and Mr. Stan in the back to present and talk about a Civil War husband. And this was her great-great-grandfather who lived in nearby Plain Grove, which is out by the Outlet Mall. So without further ado, thank you so much, Cynthia.
Okay. So my name is Cynthia Crytzer, and I wanted to thank you for having me here today. And I will apologize for my voice. This all happened yesterday. And so I've not talked for 2 days, just so I try to keep it good. I'm a retired manager, mother of 3, grandmother of 3, and I live in Mercer. And if you had told me 10 years ago that I would be standing here in front of you talking about a book I wrote on the Civil War, I would never have believed you, but yet here I am. Sometimes things fall in your lap from unexpected places and take you on a journey that you just never expected to take. So, and that's kind of what happened to me. As I was growing up, we used to have family reunions all the time. They don't seem to do that as much anymore, but I would be going to 2 or 3 every summer. But as the reunions were on and the people who were the cousins and the aunts and uncles had started passing on, and then those reunions kind of faded. So I decided to have the last reunion for the, for the Charles and Ida Caroline Nelson Mook family. So I had it at my house in 2006. And after lunch, we were all sitting around talking a little bit and showing pictures that we had. And this woman, who actually I'd never met before, she just happened to show up at the reunion. And she told me that she had these letters written by our great-great-grandfather that he had written during the Civil War and written them back to his family here in Pennsylvania. And she had them down, or she still has them down in South Carolina in a safe down there. And this was an envelope that was on these letters, and it said Thomas Donovan, letters of Thomas D. Nelson to his family, enlisted in 1861, taken prisoner May 6th of 1865, placed in Andersonville rebel prison and never heard from again. His daughter, Caroline Nelson Mook. Mary Ann said she had read these letters quickly, but she never sat and transcribed them. And I had never even heard of these letters, and I was so excited they even existed. So I talked her into sending me out copies, and she did. And thus began my 6-year journey into the life of Thomas Donovan Nelson, his wife Lydia Jane Fury Nelson, their daughters Frances, Eleanor, Isabel, Caroline, my great-grandmother, and Anna. After quickly reading these letters, I was hooked. I always enjoyed history, but not the dates, places, battles. I can never remember that, but I like the story part of the history. And here was a great story, and it was part of my own family. I decided I wanted to share what Thomas had to say with other people in my family. So I worked on transcribing them and bringing his words to life. I wrote them exactly as he wrote them, every misspelling, every bad grammar. And I also then went on to talk about what happened to his wife and 5 daughters after he didn't come home from Andersonville prison. And I thought that my family would be interested, and then I thought there might be other people interested in these letters because they told a lot about the Civil War. And today I'm going to take you on a journey during the Civil War, not your typical journey of battles and casualties or campaigns won or lost, but a journey of one man, one soldier, one father, one Civil War husband. Let's take a step back in time to August of 1861 into a small farm community called Plain Grove in Lawrence County, Pennsylvania. Thomas Donovan Nelson is on his small farm when he hears the call for volunteers to go for the Civil War and form a regiment. He feels strongly about his country and abolition of slavery and decides to leave his wife Lydia Jane and his 3 daughters, ages 7, 5, and 1 on the way, and heed this call. Yeah, I shook my head too when I figured that out. So on August 31st, 1861, Thomas goes to Harlansburg, Pennsylvania, and with the other men in the area, they formed the 100th Pennsylvania Infantry Regiment, and Thomas was assigned to Company E. The original flag was destroyed in battle, and this flag was made in 1864, and lists the battles they engaged in, including Antietam, Fredericksburg, Vicksburg, and the Wilderness. General Winfield Scott Hancock of the 100th Pennsylvania decided to nickname the regiment the Roundheads. Many of these men were Scottish descendants, and they were loyal to Oliver Cromwell, and he had led a British regiment called the Roundheads against King Charles I during the English Civil War. Cromwell's men were called Roundheads because their hair was cut very short, in contrast to the long ringlets fashionable in King Charles's court. I tried to imagine what it was like for Thomas's pregnant wife Lydia as she watched her husband leave for battle. She's standing in the door with 3 babies, and she knows that she alone is now responsible to care for the children, the house, the farm, the livestock, the garden. Maybe she was behind her husband's decision to fight in this war, and I imagine she's thinking, surely he won't be gone long. This will be over soon. And this is one of the envelopes that the letters came in. I will be sharing some of Thomas's letters and pointing out a few things I found interesting. This is one of the envelopes containing one of his letters, and it says, Lydia Jane Nelson, Plain Grove, Lawrence County, PA. A couple main themes in most letters was discussing letters, actually, those he had written, those he had received. He talks about prayer meetings, and he talks about money, what he does with money, who needs money, and he describes his surroundings, what's going on around him, what he sees. So Thomas and the rest of the 100th Pennsylvania go to Pittsburgh and muster in and head for Washington, D.C., where they remain from September to October of 1861. And if this was a Ken Burns documentary, the violins would be starting to play. Calorama, September 28th, Washington City, D.C. Lydia Jane, it is with pleasure I set down to write you a few lines to inform you that I am well, and I hope those few lines may find you all enjoying the same great blessing. I think every letter starts out with those same 2 sentences. It's like you should be a little original. I received your letter on the 26th, dated the 23rd. I was glad to hear from you, but sorry that Bella was unwell. But I hope she's feeling well by this time. The boys here, if a bowel complaint, use vinegar and salt. It is good. I don't know that I would take that medical advice, but it could have worked. Thomas describes how his guard duty is run, and he explains that he has not gotten all his uniform yet. He has gotten shoes, 2 pairs of socks, pants, and a shirt, but is waiting for his coats. And it makes me wonder how in the world all these men got uniforms and were fed in a timely manner. That's a lot of people. Hundreds and thousands of troops were mustering in Washington. This was a real boon, however, for the merchants in that area. And Thomas was told by his teamster that there were 3 bakers in the area doing a booming business, baking for 250,000 troops each. That's a lot of rolls. Thomas also relates that he is 2 miles from the Chain Bridge, which is a viaduct crossing the Potomac. This is a 6th bridge erected on this spot. The first bridge was wooden covered bridge, and it just rotted and collapsed. The second bridge was wooden and burned 6 months after it was built. The third and fourth were chain suspension bridges, hence the name Chain Bridge, and they were taken out by floods. The fifth bridge was made of wood and chains and lasted 12 years before it just collapsed. And this bridge and the seventh bridge were also taken out by floods. The chain bridge used in Washington, D.C. today is bridge number 8, and it's made of cement, so we can hope that it won't go anywhere anytime soon. An interesting fact I found while doing research was the balloon corps. I never even knew it was a balloon corps. And it was at this bridge on October 12th of 1861, the Union Army Balloon Corps took its first hot air balloon flight across the Potomac to Louisville, Virginia, where it was used to see the positions of the Confederate Army, and then they would telegraph it back to the Union. I never even knew that, so I thought it was cool. I wondered if Thomas would have seen this balloon, but he had already left for Annapolis 3 days earlier. On October 9th of 1861, the Roundheads take a train from Washington area to Annapolis. And this one reads, "We were 48 hours coming from Calorama to Annapolis, a distance of 42 miles. We are now in the state of Maryland. This is a beautiful place. We have houses to live in and everything nice. They are brick buildings that General Butler took from the rebels. They were the United States Navy School building. We are along facing the Chesapeake Bay. It is something new for most of us to see salt water and steamships on the sea. I like this place better than any I have ever seen except for home," which I thought was nice. He did add that at the end. At this point, it seems the Army needs to work on their food supply because Thomas tells about how much he has to spend getting food for himself. And he was happy because of Mr. McCune returned from this area with gifts from friends of the soldiers, and socks, gloves, pound cakes, and apples. So Mr. McCune seemed to travel back and forth all the time, and he would bring things from the soldiers home, and he'd bring things from home down to them. So they were always happy when he showed up. They stayed in Annapolis until early December, when the 100th Pennsylvania joined Sherman's brigade and moved by train to Fort Reed, then arrived at Beaufort, South Carolina by steamer. They joined in the campaign to capture Fort Walker, Fort Beauregard, and Port Royal. This says, "We marched 10 miles to the Ferry River to drive the rebels off the island, but we were disappointed when we got in the river, or to the river. They were all across on the other side. They left all their slaves on the island and most all they had. So Beaufort City is as large as Newcastle." And Thomas tells Lydia about meeting all these slaves in Beaufort, and he was surprised to find that one had 28 children. He also enjoyed eating the hoe cakes that the slaves baked for them. And the slaves told the Union soldiers that if they were given guns, they would come and fight with the Union soldiers against the Confederates. During his time in Beaufort, he also talks about camp life and mail delivery and how it was delayed. The citizens of Plain Grove sent some hospital goods, and there was so much that the men got to take some of the extra things like blankets and sheets and just other things. In July of 1862, the 100th Pennsylvania moved from Beaufort, South Carolina, to Fredericksburg, Maryland. In his letters from Fredericksburg, Thomas describes what it was like guarding the mothers, wives, and children of the Confederate soldiers they were fighting. As they march down the main street, they see little children crying because they know they're going after their daddies. Mothers and fathers and wives are yelling at them, and the young girls are singing rebel songs, and the soldiers had put up some American flags, and the girls said that they were going to take them down. And Thomas says if they take those flags down, their houses will be burned to the ground. But he didn't go on, so I don't know if that ever happened. I included this letter today because it's the only one written on Union paper, and I like that. But that was cool. But I also found it amusing that even during war, people can get upset over petty little things. Because in this letter, he says, I wrote to Mother some time ago and told her to tell John if he would write to me and acknowledge that he wronged me, then I would answer his letter. And I'm like, oh my God, you're in the middle of the Civil War and you're worried about this whole thing. Later in the letter, Thomas says that he sent Lydia $5 and she should buy a pair of shoes for Bella, a bib and a pair of shoes for the baby, and whatever's left, he should go and buy some clothes for herself. So I'm thinking $5 must have gone a far piece of that. After the 100th Pennsylvania Regiment finishes the battles of Groveton, Second Battle of Bull Run, and Chantilly, Thomas writes the only letter in this set that's not written to his wife. He discusses coming to Bull Run the night before the battle, and his regiment decides to stay back and rest so that they can go and refresh and they would be good. However, when they arrive at Bull Run at 9 or 10 in the morning, the battle is over. And he writes, Jackson has done his work and was 1 hour and 20 minutes ahead of us. Although the casualties are much higher, he writes that he came over the hill to see 800 bodies dead and wounded on the field and 3 train cars set on fire. So I stopped and just couldn't even imagine what that must have been like. See all these men, and then all these cars just on fire. And it's such a horrific sight, and all these cars were carrying ammunition and supplies for the soldiers, so that was a big loss too. After these battles, they remain in Virginia, where they participate in the battles of South Mountain, Antietam, and Fredericksburg. And this is a statue at Antietam for the 100th Pennsylvania Roundheads. The next station for the 100th Pennsylvania is Covington, Kentucky. While in Covington, they hold brigade markets outside of their camp. The market lays in front of our regiment. Our field officers set the price for everything. Then there is a guard to watch that all pay for what they buy. Anyone caught paying more for any article than the fixed price is arrested and sent to the guardhouse. Anyone coming to market with something to sell and goes inside the market lines, whether slave or citizen, and refuses to take the fixed price for his goods are seized by the officer of the day and confiscated. There is everything bought here for sale one can think of. Plate pies for 10 cents, biscuits 10 cents a dozen, eggs 15 cents a dozen, and he could buy a chicken cooked and stuffed for 25 cents. So I thought that's not too bad. The Roundheads moved south from Kentucky to Mississippi to gear up for the Battle of Vicksburg. They did. They got everywhere. Thomas tells Lydia how desolate this place is, and he said it's hardly worth fighting for. From Thomas's letter on June 23rd, 1863, from Snyder's Bluff, Mississippi, one can get an idea of what it's like sitting and waiting for these battles. This is the lonesomest place I have ever been at. We hear nothing here but continual roar of cannons. We get no papers here and don't know what is going on. But the Reds still hold Vicksburg. But Grant will take it before long. He has been planting siege guns for the last week, and report says he has got 500 guns to bear on the city. I think there will be some hard fighting done here by tomorrow or the next day. The 16th Corps marched past us last night with 80 pieces of artillery. They also learn that Lee's army is entering Gettysburg, because they were in Vicksburg when Gettysburg was going on. After the victory at Vicksburg, the Roundheads marched back to Kentucky a few months before heading to Tennessee. Thomas is sick and taken to Camp Dennison. He is so sick that one of the soldiers wrote home to Lydia and told her that he had died. So in this letter he says, You said in your letter that Madison Rogers wrote home that I was dead. I am worth 2 dead men yet. I don't blame him for writing a willful lie, for there was a great many who thought I was dead and came back to life again. He was well taken care of in this hospital, and he got good food. Thomas was all about the food. He got meat and mashed potatoes and pies every night and coffee every morning. And so, although he was sick, he enjoyed his meals. In his last letter dated January 25th of 1864, Thomas is again at Covington Barracks in Kentucky. And he tells Lydia that most of the regiment is re-enlisting, but he has decided to wait till his enlistment is over, because if he's feeling fine, then he might just come home. But if he's still feeling sick, he's going to stay in the Army because that money will take care of him. So after a furlough at home, the 100th Pennsylvania Roundheads are back on the battlefield in May of 1864. On May 6th, during the Battle of the Wilderness, Thomas is captured and sent to Andersonville in Georgia and never heard from again. It is listed that Thomas died in September of 1864. It is so sad to think that Thomas made it all the way back to Virginia, but not that last little piece till the end of the war. In Plain Grove, there is a monument that's up in one of the cemeteries. I don't know, some of you I'm sure have seen it. This is a monument honoring those who fought in the Civil War. And it reads, erected to the memory of the men from Plain Grove and vicinity who served in the Civil War, 1861 to 65. From these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave their full measure of devotion. We are highly resolved that these dead shall not have died in vain. Lydia last saw her husband in January of 1864. After he was captured, she gave birth to their 5th daughter, Anna, in August of 1864. And after she gets no more letters and the war is ending, her income stops. So she applies for pension from the government. To get this pension, she has to have someone from the 100th Pennsylvania Roundheads say that they saw Thomas in Andersonville and he was so sick that he never would have left there. Because there doesn't seem to be a list of him there. And she also had to swear affidavits from family members that yes, she was Thomas's husband, and yes, each of the children was his child, so that she could get pensions for all of them. And she ends up getting $8 a month for her and $3 for each of the children. And so that's like about $22. After receiving this pension, Lydia finds that she still cannot manage to take care of her children. And she hears about schools that the state of Pennsylvania is starting to organize that might help her children. These are called Soldiers' Orphan Schools. And I had never heard of these schools before either, and decided to learn more about them. On Thanksgiving morning of November 26, 1863, Pennsylvania Governor Andrew Curtin was at his executive mansion in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Preparation for being made for a big feast for him and his wife and 4 children. And suddenly there was a knock at the door, and standing outside is 2 children, a little boy and a little girl, begging for bread. Their father had died in the Civil War. Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine. Thanks for coming. Their father had died in the Civil War, and their mother had also died. They had no one to care for them. So this is Andrew Curtin on the left. He could not get the thoughts of these children out of his mind, and Governor Curtin later exclaimed to family and friends, "Great God, is it possible that the people of Pennsylvania can feast this day, and the children of her soldiers who have fallen in this war beg bread from door to door?" So he decided even before the war ended, the system needed to be set up to care for the children of the Pennsylvania's fallen soldiers. I said, it doesn't say that he invited them in for Thanksgiving dinner. In June of 1864, Thomas Burroughs, the other man there, was appointed superintendent of soldiers' orphans. Through his efforts, 46 soldier orphan schools were set up in Pennsylvania. for children ages 6 to 16. Some used existing orphanages and some used old folks' homes. Some were built new. Some were in the farms and some were in the cities. Most of the students stayed at school till they were 16, and they were called 16ers. And if they stayed till 18, they were called scholars. When they left the school, they either went on to college or they got married or they got jobs. Or just went on. By about 1800, most of the children had gone through the schools, so the enrollment had declined, and most of them had ended up closing. And the one in Mercer County was in Mercer. It was outside of Mercer. It was a really nice farm. I have a picture there, but I'll have a picture up here too. So on January the 1st, 1868, Lydia enrolls her two older daughters, Frances, age 13, and Sarah Eleanor, age 11, in the Soldiers' Orphan School in Phillipsburg, Beaver County, Pennsylvania. This is now called Monaca. Both girls remained until they were 16 years of age, and Lydia leaving to get married, and Sarah went on to attend Edinburgh State Normal School. Now, growing up, I had always been told that Lydia had been remarried and that her second husband didn't want the little children around, so he sent them away. But when I did research and found her gravestone and in census records, it had her name as Nixon, so I thought this must just be a story. But as I was searching military records, I found that she did marry 2 times again, and she must have just gone back to Nelson, because I think she tried to get pension again after the second husband died. So in 1871, she marries George McElravy, and after arranging for all the pensions to go to him, he sends the little ones to the Mercer Soldiers' Orphan School. So it was more of a farm. The middle daughter, Isabel, stayed home with Lydia and her new husband. And I saw in some family papers, I think she maybe had some heart issues, so she maybe wasn't well enough to go. All 4 daughters left the Soldiers' Orphan School at age 16. But according to old newspaper records, their lives were anything boring. The oldest, Frances, married William Randolph and lived in Newcastle in Lawrence County. They had 4 children and lived a quiet life. Her husband, William, worked on the railroad, and he loved to take the train up to a lake somewhere up here in Mercer for a day of catching turtles. And it was on one of these trips that he caught a large turtle, 26 pounds. And so he took the train back, and the train had stopped at the station. And he got out of the train car and leaned over to show this turtle to somebody. And he fell when the train lurched, and the train ran over him. So he was carried home. But before he died, he asked that he be allowed, or that his mother be allowed to visit him. And this was kind of questionable because at the exact same time that he was hit by the train, his mother was in court in Newcastle being convicted of trying to hire somebody to kill the president of the Fulton National Bank in Newcastle. And she was finally given permission, but William passed before she reached him. And the weird thing is, when I gave this talk in the Lawrence County Historical Society last week, and Stan says, I think that guy's picture is on the wall. And Fultz's picture was up on the wall. I'm like, this is crazy. So Frances and William's oldest son, Shannon, led a very hard life, and he grew up well known to the police in Newcastle for drinking and stealing and fighting. This could stem from an incident from his youth. When he was about 11, he was outside playing with some of his friends, and another like 11-year-old came, and he had just bought a gun from a corner store for 75 cents. And he came, he was trying to show off, so he shot at a duck and he missed it. And the kids started laughing, and so he went up to the 6-year-old friend of Shannon's and he said, oh, watch this. And he gets the gun and he shoots the kid in the head. And the newspapers are very graphic about this kind of stuff, but I didn't put all that stuff in. That would be tragic for anybody to see, and there was nobody to help him through this trauma. So he had a really hard life, I think. He finally moved away later. He moved to Chicago and was married, so hopefully he got through that. Their daughter Ella grew up to be the only woman butcher in the United States. She won a $10 gold piece at a contest in Pittsburgh, competing against 12 men. She claimed the first 10 years were the hardest. After that, one seldom cuts one's fingers, she says. Thomas and Lydia's second daughter, Sarah Eleanor, went on to get a teaching degree from Edinburgh State Normal School. And she actually taught for a while at the Mercer Soldiers Orphan School where her sisters went. She married William McElwain, an attorney, and lived in Findlay, Ohio. She and William had 2 daughters, and they were only 4 and 2 when their mother died in childbirth. So Lydia was the only one of Thomas and Lydia's daughters who did not go to the Soldiers Orphan School. In 1880, census shows her living with her mother, Lydia, and Lydia's second husband. It also shows Isabel as having 2 children by then. The census lists Isabel as George McElravy's stepdaughter, but her children are listed as his nieces. You can take with that what you want. It could be, we'll just say it could be to protect her. Isabel eventually married Horatio Rash Caldwell. Rash turns out to be a good name for him, and their tranquil marriage ended with these headlines. Steubenville was treated to a sensational murder in which Horatio G. Caldwell shot and killed Amos Weems, alias Turkey. After a night of drinking, Rash and his friend Turkey Weems went to Isabel and Rash's house, and Horatio falls asleep, and Rash tries to assault Isabel. She fights and he leaves. The next morning, which happened to be Easter morning, she tells Horatio what happens. So he goes out, steals a gun from his neighbor, and finds Turkey Wings and shoots him. He is sentenced to 12 years of hard labor, and Isabel dies while he is in prison. So Caroline Nelson, Thomas and Lydia's 4th daughter, was only 2.5 when she saw her father for the last time. After leaving the Soldiers Orphan School, according to the 1880 census, Carrie is a servant in Venango County, and during this time she met her future husband, Charles Mook. And they lived in the Venango County area for their entire married lives. They were married for over 60 years and lived in this house that he had built for her. Of the 11 children born to Charles and Carrie Mook, only 6 lived to adulthood, one being their youngest daughter, Iris, who was my grandmother. Thomas never saw his youngest daughter, Anna, and it's not clear if he even knew when she was born. In fact, I did not even know about Anna when I was doing all this research and reading the letters, because she was never mentioned in the letters that I had. But when I was looking through the census records, I kept seeing that she lived in Wellsville, Ohio, with her daughter, and her name was Hannah. Well, first it was Mrs. L.D. Miller, which for anybody doing genealogy, that's crazy. Then I saw Hannah, and then I saw Anna, and I'm like, there is nobody with that name. But then in a family record that I dug out, it shows that she was the youngest daughter was named Anna. So when I found her name, then I started looking, and I found in the 1880 census that she was residing in the Mercer Soldiers Orphan School. And I went to Mercer Historical Society, and Bill Filson brought out some boxes from the Soldiers Orphan School. They're 2 big boxes, if anybody ever wants to look at that stuff. So he took one, I took one, we start digging, and he says, "Oh, found it, here she is." And I just thought, here I am holding a picture of my great-great Aunt Anna that I didn't even know existed 2 weeks before this point. So while not all the Soldiers Orphan Schools were good places, because in the newspapers you can see kids running away and stuff, Mercer must have been a really good school. They must have treated their students very well. because every year they had reunions in Mercer. And these were just little reunions. These were like big weekend affairs. They had elected officers. They had elected officers, and they had programs that were planned. That's the program book on the right there. And they had address books of all the people. And this woman who kept these 2 boxes of stuff, she had newspaper articles for every person. If that person's sister died, she had a clipping of it, everything. They made decorations and pins. And this is on the courthouse in Mercer, on the north side. And it says, in memory of the Mercer Soldiers Orphan School, Mercer, PA, opened in 1868, closed in 1889, maintained by the state of Pennsylvania for the purpose of providing a home and education for the children of her soldiers and sailors who served during the Civil War. This tablet is placed by the 16ers Association of Mercer Soldiers Orphan School in their 35th reunion, held at Mercer, PA, August 12, 1926. So in 1895, Anna marries Lorenzo Miller, and they moved to Wellsville, Ohio, where they had a grocery store and a meat market, and that's the 2 top pictures. And it says L.D. Miller across the top. They later bought the Metropole Hotel, which is that bottom picture. And her husband was brought before the court many times for liquor violations. And once for having a saloon open on a Sunday and for scrubbing out and running the filthy water over the sidewalk and into the gutter. After Lorenzo and Anna retired to Florida, Anna became an early member of the Daughters of the Union Veterans of the Civil War. She served as president and treasurer of the Cornelia Boyd Turney Tent Number 3. And I feel that there may be even a second set of letters written by Thomas, because when his wife died, she had 2 daughters left. And my great-grandmother had 1 set, and I felt they would have given another set to this Anna. But she had no children. And I felt she would have given them to this Daughters of the Union Veterans, but I have contacted many people in that organization, and I can't get any. Everybody says they're not there, so I don't know. Maybe someday I will come up with them. And we'll have to have volume 2. So, in ending, I want to say, in writing this book, it became very evident to me that no matter what war, when that soldier walks out the door towards battle, their life and the lives of everyone around them changes forever. The soldier must adjust to life in a strange place, performing duties he never dreamed he would be doing. And their families must adjust to life without their spouse, parent, or child for a short while, or as in this case, forever. How the lives of Lydia, Frances, Sarah, Bella, Carrie, and Anna would have been different if Thomas had returned from the Civil War. And I want to thank Peggy Lochner, because without her help, I never would have gotten this book done. She helped me set it up. She helped me with the publisher, and she was just great. And thank you.
Anybody have any questions?
Yeah.
Do you know where the veterans school was in Mercer?
Okay, if you go to the back of the courthouse, on the, I'm not sure which way, East Market, you go down the hill, and then there's that turn that goes to Grove City. When you get to the bottom of that hill, off to the left is where it was. There's still a building there, but I'm not sure if that was part of it or not. We drove up there one time, and this guy, we were in his driveway, and so he didn't know what we were talking about. I was trying to find it. But Bill said he would take me there, and I never got him to do that, so I don't know.
Would it be where it turned into a hospital?
Well, yeah, I think that
Yeah.
building that was the hospital, I think that was probably part of it. Because it had a long white building, and that's what that is. So it could possibly be.
Is Mercer Cottage Hospital still standing? Is that the building still standing?
There's a building up there where that hospital was, and where I think the school was. So,
people that have it now are, she's a missionary and goes to Mexico, and our local churches collected things for her to take, and she takes a big trailer each year. And they collect sewing machines and things like that.
Oh,
Yeah, and they have some animals there. They have someone that stays and takes care of them. It's a strange situation. Huge house, I mean, huge
Yeah.
building, and they just live in part of it, part of the year.
What a wonderful story of your family.
mhm.
What a wonderful
Oh,
story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thrilled. It's just really cool. And then in the book, it goes further down to the kids, you know, what happens to these people's kids. And some of them, like one falls down an elevator shaft. I said, only in this family could that happen. So like crazy things happen to these people.
Very memorable and colorful
Colorful.
reunion
Well,
in history.
I always said that, you know, as I was doing this, my grandmother, the youngest of all these children, or of Carrie's children, she was very proper. And, you know, she thought things should be this way. And I laugh sometimes because I'm like, these stories of the guy with the turtle and getting run over by a train, and these are her cousins. And I'm thinking she must have thought, hey, God. She was, you know, she'd have to hear these stories. And, you know, Isabel's husband shooting somebody, that was her uncle. I'm like, okay.
Families can be strange.
I said, I guess that's why I never heard of them.
Yeah.
Because I never heard of any of these people. Yeah.
How old was he when he left for war?
So he was born in 28, and he went in 61. So
He wasn't young.
no,
33.
I hadn't figured it out this morning, but it left me now. So yeah, around 33.
Mhm.
So yeah, he had 4 kids. Well, one on the way, but
Did you hear what Mike said?
no.
Said that when you didn't want-
4 kids.
And they were all girls.
Oh, they were all girls too.
But I found it funny, sometimes he would be writing, I like this camp life, you know, getting fed, we're doing this, we're just sitting around, and I'm like, she must have gone, oh my God. When she got these letters, I mean, I didn't think she would be so stressed to get these letters, and he's go, you know, I go fight these battles, but
She's fighting her own battles at home with 4 kids.
yeah.
5 girls total.
And she's
I mean,
Trying to keep a farm
seeing
going.
what he's going through.
Well, she had a farm for a while because he talks to her about the animals and getting wheat for the winter and stuff like that. So she had to have a little farm, but I don't know what happened to it. And I mean, and she had his parents and her parents were both in the area. So yes,
You're continuing to do research with your family, or you holding up here after your book? How long has your book been out, I guess, first question?
well, I published it in November of 2020, and then it all just sat there because you couldn't go out and talk about it. So I'm just getting started doing talks about it.
So are you doing any other research? Or are you?
I mean, I do some things, you know, if I found something, but it was pretty much when I decided I had to quit looking because I kept finding things I'd like to put in the book. It's like, you gotta stop at some point. You know, so.
You could write a sequel.
Yeah, well, if I ever found those other letters, if I ever came across them, I mean, we really looked. I took a whole year and looked. And we went to the Library of Congress in Washington thinking, well, maybe they went there. Talked to the historical societies in Florida, a few around where they lived. And then I looked in Chicago because our one niece, the butcher, lived with her for a while, but she moved to Chicago, so I checked that, and I just decided I have to stop because if I don't, I would never get this published, so I just had to stop. Yep.
So why don't you tell them about your presentation when you were out? Weren't you in Antietam? And, you know, when you were out
I was just
Central
in,
PA,
I just went to Gettysburg.
and you gave a presentation.
No, I just did book signings there. I haven't done that yet.
Okay, but still, you went out there and gave books, people were interested.
Oh, yeah.
Here.
I did real well with that. I just sit at the Heritage Center and I just say, we're doing a book signing and talk about it. And well, so I have some here, by the way.
Yeah, where is your book available tonight?
Yes. Yes.
And it's on Amazon too, right?
It is on Amazon too. Or it's on you can get through my website too.
But this one could be signed here.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I sign them when I send them off.
Okay, and I hate that Kathy Jack missed out tonight because she belongs to a group, and I don't remember the name of the group in Gettysburg, and they go there every summer. So,
Well, I'll just have to do it again.
oh, you will, yeah. And we have 2 genealogists here that work within the building, and so it's, you know, you've made us wonder, okay, how colorful could my family history tree be? And it sounds like we're all probably in the same boat. We have some that are more upstanding than others.
That's a nice way to put it.
Well, you know, when I went through this and I realized I understand abolition now. You know, like, it was crazy. People would get drunk and fight and drunk and kill people. And I thought, okay, I can see why that came about. But most of the crazy stuff came from newspapers.com and newspaperarchive.com. Not so much through Ancestry. But those newspapers, they tell you everything.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
And having visited Vicksburg, the park in Vicksburg, Military Park, you can still see some of the trenches that were
Oh yeah,
dug.
I want to go there.
Yeah, it's fabulous. You can either drive through yourself and you have the audio tape and so forth, or go on the tour. But yeah, it's amazing that things have lasted that long.
Yeah.
York too.
Well, Cindy, we thank you for being here tonight.
Well, thank you
Very
for having me.
entertaining and interesting.
Yep.
Again, she does have copies of her book for sale. We have refreshments here, so if you'd like to stay and mingle and visit, we again thank you for coming, and maybe we'll see you when you do your next book.
Yeah.
Okay. A sequel to tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Oh, yeah. You are right about the newspaper articles. I